Is workplace mental health a global concern? Now, coming out of the pandemic, is it a good idea to go back to the normal? My guest today is Maggie Georgopoulos, who is an ex C suite, a mental health advocate, and one of WOMEL's 25 powerful women to watch. She's here to answer these questions concerning mental health in the workplace.
Welcome to Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. This podcast was created for the boomer woman leaving corporate, and now you're looking to reinvent yourself, become an author, an entrepreneur, a podcaster. Well, each episode will leave you with clarity. You will come away with the yes, I can and yes, I will reinvent myself mindset. So come on, let's do this. I'm your host, Margot Levette. Hello, everybody. Margot Levette back with another episode, Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. But all of March, we are working in collaboration with WOMEL Magazine. And together, we are celebrating 25 powerful women to follow for Women's History Month. I am here with one of those powerful, let me put another powerful women, Maggie Georgopoulos. She's coming to us from Vietnam. Let me tell you about this lady. She is an award-winning, and I'm putting in global authority on mental health and workplace. So that's the conversation today. Mental health, leadership, mental health in the workplace. So welcome, Maggie Georgopoulos. I can't wait for us to get started.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
You are the authority. If we need to know what's going on for women and our mental health in the workplace, and I would imagine you even take it into our homes, because leadership is wherever women are. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. Leadership's wherever any of us are, and women are often actually at the forefront of that, even though they don't generally acknowledge it or fully realize it, or more often be acknowledged for it.
Yes, man, I totally agree with that. So with that said, Maggie, I'm looking at your wheelhouse. You speak, you eat, sleep, and breathe this thing of mental health and leadership and in the workplace. So as the global person that you are you finding that women's mental health, connecting that with workplace and leadership, are we at a crisis, a crossroads globally?
I think we potentially are. And part of it is that we're not acknowledging things. And if you want to even look at from a media perspective, or even the tabloid hoo-ha type perspective, I mean, the fact that you've just had Meghan Markel come out with Harry and discuss, the level of depression that she was in, and then effectively have the world news media treat it like, how dare she? She can't claim that she's this because she's this. And they're failing to acknowledge that, mental health is not about being a princess or being rich or being famous or being a leader or being poor or being homeless or mental health is something that we all have, and we're still treating it like it's something that people should be alienated for or treated badly for, or they can't claim to have it if they don't hit a certain set of criteria. And that's just rubbish. And with everything that's going on, we don't need that sort of thing going on out there.
Gotcha. I hear you. What do I hear you say, that what's going on with mental health globally is that we still do not want to acknowledge it, and we separate it from that's them, and here I am right here. But little does the world know we're all a part of mental health. Is that what I hear you say?
Exactly what I'm saying. Beautifully said.
You bring up Meghan Markel. I was touched when I heard that, and I wondered about the rest of the monarchy. How many people are going through that. I think about people who are not part of the monarchy. They are in families where it's taboo. You better not say you're getting therapy, or you better not say anything about wanting to harm yourself. So I see how it is a global issue. But when it comes down to our workplace and we are expected to perform, you come from the C-suite at age 32. Let me look at my notes because I want to make sure I get this correct. At age 32, you were an executive chairman of a large agricultural company. You are committed. You were then and you are now committed to diversity and well-being. But with that achievement, with that drive, with reaching that C-suite, you still encountered negativity. I don't even know the word I'm looking for. You still encountered the fact that mental health is something that we separate ourselves from. Will you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's the same thing that, sadly, it's the same thing now as it was then. This whole idea that particularly if you're in the C-suite, that if you're in a leadership role, therefore you are supposedly perfect, and supposedly perfect means that you can't be depressed, that you can't have anxiety, that you can't have some sort of mental health disorder, which is, because people don't understand them, people feel makes you less in some way, shape or form. You're not allowed to have any of those things that make you stand out or be different. And it's really ironic because we'll go to the effort of trying to fix a workplace so that somebody in a wheelchair can access the workplace. But we suddenly think it's a problem to create space in a workplace in order to ensure that someone who is depressed, whether that be because they have a brain chemistry imbalance, which means that depression is part of their nature, or whether it's because something in their circumstances has caused that depression, or someone who's anxious because there are circumstances outside of work and inside of work that are creating that environment. We feel that if we create something to support them, that what we're doing is we're saying that it's okay to not be capable. And what we're failing to understand is that these people actually bring things to the workplace even with these conditions, which means that they do things differently, they see things differently, they operate from a different perspective, but not even taking that into account, just taking in basic common sense. Everybody has something in their life that could potentially impact them that way. And if we don't have a workplace that's willing to support that, how are we going to get people who are going to remain productive, loyal, want to be part of our workplace, feel that they want to give to it, when what we're going to do is make them feel bad if they don't fit this perfect set of totally inaccessible and unnatural criteria. It's just, and as I said, it hasn't changed. It's the same thing that was there all those years ago, and nearly 20 odd years later, I feel like we're bashing our head against the same wall. I'm watching it in the workplace that I'm currently in, where there's a mother who's dealing with the fact that her son has currently been committed because he was so depressed he was potentially life-harming, and she's feeling trapped because she's worried about what people are going to think of her. She's worried about what people are going to think of him, and part of that just takes away the energy that she could be focusing on how she can support him, on how she can get support, because do you know what? He may be the one that's being directly treated for a recognisable mental health condition, but this is now impacting her mental health and impacting her ability in the workplace. And we're failing to see all of those combinations because we're so stuck on you have to be a certain type of person to have this, as opposed to it happens to everyone, because we all have mental health.
Yes. Oh. I love how you are shaping this up and letting us know that this is reality, that people every day are coming to the workplace and they're dealing with different things. This is your mission. This is your conversation. How did you take this on? And how is it that it's so very important to you, Maggie?
I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 17. And some of the ways that people reacted to it back then, and as a result, the way I then dealt with it, of what informed the way I now look at things and deal with things now. So, as you've mentioned, I've had a highly successful career and continue to have a highly successful career. And contrary to popular belief, bipolar is not curable. I have it, but it is manageable. And just because I have bipolar doesn't mean that I suffer, doesn't mean that I'm constantly in a state of problem, doesn't mean that I'm constantly in a state of not being able to do things. Actually, because of my bipolar, I've actually been able to do things that within a past workplace, and I hope it does become within a past workplace, and it is a discussion that you'll notice is popping up on social media, this idea of the person that works the long hours, that puts in the hard slog. Because of that, I naturally did that, because when I was in a hypo state or a very high state, my brain would be running at 100 miles an hour. So I'd punch out reports, punch out procedures, be in the workplace dealing with problems, and I could just kind of snap that all out. It's part of the reason I climbed the ladder so quickly. Yet, ironically, if I'd ever admitted to the fact that I had bipolar during that time, I would have lost my job within a second. Because suddenly it would have been damaged goods, not capable. And the fact that I was female as well, working in a male-dominated field, would have been a total wipeout, And looking at that and the way I was treated in school, I now feel that I need to speak out about that. And I need to make people understand that that's not acceptable, because people don't see me as damaged goods until they see the label.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is fascinating to me. I read your article in Womel magazine. This is fascinating to hear you actually speak from it from the front seat. You were actually there experiencing that. My next question is, okay, there are other women in the C-suite, and God forbid that anybody knows what's going on with them. Did it exacerbate your condition when you were trying to keep it away from the powers that be?
Not only it does. Okay, because part of the management is being able to have a set of tools in place that allow me to work around if I'm, in a manic depressive phase, which means that I'm, for no apparent reason, I'm not going to be functioning fully at that sort of state. But I have a set of measures that I use to manage that. And some of those measures include the fact that I would reduce the amount of face time I might have. So I'm very careful during those phases about how many meetings I would plan, or if I even feel like I'm kind of edging that way, I'd once again do that. And part of the reason I do that is because I'm managing my energy. And by managing my energy, then I'm able to maintain a more stable appearance within the workplace, as opposed to this appearance that everybody imagines comes with bipolar because of what's written about it in books and on television and stuff like that. And the same goes for the manic, the hypomanic phases, where I am, that brain rushing and all the rest of it. Once again, there are management tools in place. And some of those tools include the fact that as I've, grown, so back in the days when I was in the C-suite, I did do all the, extra hours, all the rest of it. As I've grown and become more aware of how to better manage things so I don't have those, huge peaks and troughs, it means that I manage my workplace time. Even if I'm feeling really hyperactive, then I put that into something like physical activity. So, for example, at the moment, I do these amazing kickboxing classes. So they're ways of me getting that energy out, getting that power out, once again, managing that. So it's not all channeled into the unhealthiness of almost permanently being in a workplace. Now, I'm managing it with a recognised disorder, but we all manage things in those ways. We all naturally have highs and lows within our lives, and we need to be able to take that out of the workplace. Shouldn't be what our lives revolve around. The workplace should be what enables us to have our lives, not the other way around. And that's a big problem we've got.
I hear what you are saying, and it rings a bell with a conversation I had with someone a couple of days ago. When you are work, driven, high achiever, I have to show up this kind of way. It's if you don't manage that, you're going to crash. Something's going to happen in your health. I want people to hear this. Women in particular, these are Maggie said it, Christina said it. You can't be dogmatic and driven like that and not expect something to happen. You can have a disorder. I want to tell people about your book, Up the Ladder in a Skirt. It's obvious you were there in the C-suite, had the disorder, so you can be there. But what I hear you saying, and I love, is that you have to own it and manage what's going on. Is that what I hear you say?
That's exactly what you hear me saying. And as I said, you don't need to have a diagnosed disorder to need to understand that you have to manage it. And with everything that's going on with, the global pandemic that we've had to deal with, a lot of this is coming up, and yet we're still seem to be pushing it aside or making an excuse for it. And yet we're still failing to realize that we've literally had these massive doors opened on an opportunity to reframe what becomes an operational norm in the workplace, to reframe it in such a way that we're protecting all of our staff. We remember the idea that, staff need to get up for screen breaks because we don't want them to damage their eyes, or we're trying to get, physical health in. So we run morning yoga and lunchtime yoga and stuff like that. And we look at it from a physical perspective, but we forget that the morning yoga or lunchtime yoga is actually really good from a mental perspective. Taking regular breaks is good from a mental perspective. Working hours, which means that you can go home and still have a good family life if you've got a family that you want to be around, is good from a mental health and physical perspective, because your mind and body are connected. Being able to go and do things that you enjoy as a single person as well. Once again, these are things we need to do. This idea of that comes out of the industrial age of a workplace where the longer we work shows that how good we are, really, really needs to be trashed. And I'm just finding it frustrating that we seem to want to push back to what we used to have when we suddenly got an opportunity to reframe it and rebalance. We've seen that workplaces can still function when we're not physically there. So but people like to be physically there, so let's balance it so that we can have both worlds, rather than going, no, we're going to go back to the old way because that was the best way, because it was all great before this happened. It wasn't.
No. Let's create a new, everybody's talking about normal. You're right. That old way was not the best way. And I love that I hear you say, now is the time to create format, to lay the foundation for this new normal, because diversity, inclusion, now we can really talk about diversity and inclusion and include our mental health, which is what we all deal with one time or another. Maggie, I'm wondering, coming out of the pandemic, many women have been home for a year, more than a year. What do you foresee with this old way of thinking? Women are going back into the workplace slowly, but going. What do you foresee that looking like in 6 months? Is that going to be successful, actually going back? Are we actually going to be able to go back into the office space and be all right mentally?
I think yes and no. And this comes back to this idea that we need to reframe what so-called normal is. Because if you look at it from the perspective of we have different preferences, different comfortable ways of working, there are many people, and unfortunately, they're the ones that are being heard louder than the others. There are many people who aren't functioning quite so well with the idea of not having that office space to go to. So they need to be able to go back to their office in the best interest of their mental health. But there are also many people that are actually quite comfortable with the idea that they're getting at least some time at home and maybe a smaller amount of time connecting in a physical workplace, or even all of the time at home and very little time connecting in a physical workplace only when absolutely necessary. And as I said, what we have is this idea that it's actually possible. And it also means that, we don't need to go back to the old framework of what is professional or what is the right way to do things. It's one of the things that I found really fascinating, particularly at the moment on LinkedIn, when you see all the conversations that have particularly risen up, through the Black Lives Matter stuff, where we're finally getting voices that are just saying, why can't I just be me? What's wrong with the way I look? And, we're looking at, once again, these norms that are being laid on old white guys who were in the office as the professional norm. But I don't know. I don't look so hot in a pinstripe suit. That's all I can say. I don't see why someone needs to tame their hair just because the old white guy is not capable of achieving that look. So the same thing goes for, why should I fit a particular mold on how I look at something? And why do we need to always have someone sitting in an office 9 to 5 or 7 till 10 because that looks more impressive, just to fit an image of what's supposedly normal? Because if anything has been shown through this, it is that there is no normal. Like, we all impact things in a different way, and every single person brings a different view, a different voice, a different perspective, a different way of solving things. And without those different minds, ways of looking at things, we wouldn't have things like the vaccines that they're coming up with, the ways that we can go forward to do things. We even need to keep the open mind from the perspective of sitting here in Vietnam. I feel frustrated because the only reason I'm locked down is because the rest of the world's not getting their stuff together. Like, we've been free to be in the workplace for most of the last 12 months, while everybody else keeps getting locked down. We can still go out and socialize. I still, talk about regularly going to my gym. We go to bars, all of that stuff, because a particular political system which the world doesn't accept, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I will never say that, that's not what it's about, but it worked. What the government did here worked. Now, many places were rejected out of hand because we don't agree with the politics of the country, but that's beside the point. What they did worked. And it comes back to different people with different ideas can come up with different solutions. And if we're not going to be open to them, that's not going to happen. My fear for, as we start to move back to something more normal, when we've managed to get this under control and we've got more freedom of movement, is that we're going to want to try and slot things back to what they were. And women in particular are going to end up being even more oppressed and even less heard than they already were. It's almost like they've come up with an excuse to shove us back into the boxes we've just started stepping out of. And that's my fear. I hope it won't be like that, but it is my fear.
Gotcha. I'm feeling the same way and sensing the same thing, because the powers that be don't want to lose power. They don't want to lose face. We've been doing it right for so long. And I'm here in the States, and when I hear about how you are living and how things have been going in Vietnam, all the more alarm bells are going off that people in power don't want better necessarily for all of us, for a myriad of reasons. But I won't go into that. I'm just really feeling, this is not right. Listen, what's next for Maggie Georgopoulos? Where do you, I'm looking at the time, what's next? Where are you going with all of this? And how can women as a whole, how can we keep these conversations going? How can we make sure that we don't revert back to the old way?
I think we keep doing things like this, these very dialogues, the fact that we have the ability to put this information out there. We still have our voices on the social media platforms. We need to go into our workplaces and use those voices to make a difference. And if we're in a workplace where we feel like we can't make that difference, then get the hell out of there. There's no sense in staying somewhere that's not going to keep you well. That's not in a benefit to your career. find yourself somewhere else. Okay, you may have to stick it a tiny little bit of time while you make that movement, but do that, because sometimes you are beating your head up against a solid brick wall. But those places hopefully will become less and less as long as we keep the conversation going. And I think that's the important part. If we continue to be, rather than the stereotype that's gone out there of women leaders being the ones that are pushing their fellow women down, we continue to be what supposedly embodies women, this idea of being community-minded, working to help each other actually rise up, supporting each other. We continue to do that, we're going to eventually make a difference, even with the people in power pushing to try and hold the status quo and try to use the current situation in order to do that. We will make a difference, because there are so many women out there at the moment that I just can see refuse to be silent. And if you go back to our original discussion, Meghan Markel is a perfect example of that. She didn't need to tell the world what she was doing, but she's told the world because it may help make a difference in one person's life. And if each of us could do that, then we're building it up.
Gosh, I'm going to applaud you on that. I'm applauding you on this whole conversation, but that is so important what you spoke of. We have to keep the conversation going. And as I close this out, just give me your thoughts on asking. Part of us keeping the conversation is us taking our stand and our power and asking for different things in the workplace and wherever we are. What are your thoughts on that? Just ask.
Exactly. And I totally agree with that. Just ask. And if you ever, once again, if you're in a workplace where asking constantly gets beaten down or you get pushed aside for it, then to me, that's a very strong indicator you're in a workplace you need to get out of. And eventually that place is going to fail, because if they constantly keep pushing people down for asking or trying to contribute or trying to help the place evolve and be better, then they're never going to be better. And if those people are moving somewhere that allows that, then the competition is going to become better. And that's what we need to remember. We have the ability to make those changes through our actions. And sometimes it feels lonely and it feels hard. And I will admit, one of my big statements often is, I'm so tired. That constant needing to do it. It's like you feel like after so many years it should have changed and it hasn't. But at the end of the day, I will still get up tomorrow and decide, do you know what? Even though I feel tired, I'm going to still make one more effort on fighting this battle. And I think that's what we all need to remember. And the fact that when we get to that point, most of us, and those of us who don't need to find it, have somebody we can turn to who totally understands what we're saying. And we can just go and let it all out and then take the step into the battle again. And as long as we keep doing that, we're going to eventually make that difference. And then hopefully our daughters and our granddaughters and their granddaughters aren't going to have to fight this battle. They can fight something totally different. And they can create something totally different, and they can be their amazing selves without having to push through all of this to get there.
Mental health and leadership. Mental health and the workplace. My amazing conversation with Maggie Georgopoulos. I have enjoyed this because we're not looking at it from we're looking at this on a global scale, which makes it so timely. I thank you. A million thanks. You are a podcaster, author of Up the Ladder in a Skirt, and definitely a global voice and advocate for mental health in the workplace. I thank you. Take care. And gosh, I don't even know how to end this conversation. I have about a zillion other questions, as I always do. But I think that you put it in a proper perspective so that we don't have to be in the C-suite. Wherever we are in leadership, we have a responsibility, and there's something that we can do to further this conversation. You take care, dear lady. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for listening to Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. Couple of things that I want you to do right now. Go to my website, pick up a copy of Her Business, Her Voice, Her Reinvention, how I went from game show hopping to international show host, author, and speaker in 1 year. Number 2, please freely listen to each and every episode. Share them out with your family, friends, the men in your lives. And then number 3, get in contact with me, one of the experts that have been on the show, because I want to make sure that you reinvent yourself. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode here on Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation.